My name is Andrea Jandriček, and I am an architect, and I am co-founder, along with two other co-founders, of a new nonprofit by the name of Changing Ground Project. Our goal is to redevelop our existing suburbs using a new technique called land readjustment. So we're going to talk about that in this presentation. You're going to get an idea of what it is and how it can be used in Cincinnati. So just to start off, looking at Cincinnati and looking at our population growth, we had a really fantastic year these past few years. So these are figures from the Cincinnati Regional Chamber of Commerce. We added about 20,000 people over the course of 1 year from 2023 to 24. We are expected to grow by 150,000 to as much as 500,000 people by the year 2050. So this is, of course, the greater Cincinnati area. So this encompasses 15 counties, not just Hamilton County. There's going to be absorption through all of these counties. But I thought these numbers were interesting for us to think about because how are we going to absorb all of this population growth in our region? I think is a very good question for all of us, and especially those of us maybe in the planning sector. How are we going to manage that urban growth that is happening? So we've got this good population growth, and that is a great thing. So it's driven a lot by immigration. It's driven a lot by macroeconomic figures. We have a lot of good corporations that are here. Our growth is very steady. It's not sporadic, or I should say like fast-paced, like say Nashville or Atlanta. So we have a very good, nice, steady growth. And really, when you think about how are we going to absorb that growth into our neighborhoods is a very good question. So far, in terms of the way we have been doing our housing, we have pretty much focused on single-family development over the years. There's been a boom of single-family neighborhoods, especially in our northern portion, so places like Westchester and Mason, that used to be farming communities, and now they are, bigger suburban communities. Will we be able to expand in that way? Will we be able to grow in that way? So, second. So, so it's a good question to think about. Growing Cincinnati in that way may not be the best idea. We can't just scale up our single-family home production. When we do things like that, we're basically scaling up our car congestion, our traffic congestion. Just imagine 500,000 more cars on the road for your daily commute. So we have to be thinking about different ways of development. How in the world are we going to be developing up our metropolitan area? So Cincinnati is definitely transitioning into a more dynamic metropolitan area. Right now we're at, I think it's 31 in the United States in terms of size, but we are growing. Our top challenge is we are a heavily automobile-oriented city. You can't get around anywhere without a car. We are a historically segregated city with neighborhoods of certain economic classes, certain social classes, demographics. We have an aging housing stock. We have, many homes that probably can't be really, it might not be even worth repairing. It might be a question of maybe it's better just to rebuild. We also rank 12th in the nation for income inequality. So there's huge inequality that is here in the city. And then also we're experiencing a lot of suburban poverty. And this not only affects the families, but it also affects the tax bases of our neighborhoods. So it makes just development very difficult. It makes our neighborhoods kind of trapped in a cycle of, poverty, not being able to move forward, et cetera. So these are the things that we are trying to think about. So we need to think about just a different type of redevelopment. What we need to be thinking about is how can we urbanize our existing suburban neighborhoods? And so right now, it seems as if all of our suburban neighborhoods are kind of frozen in the way they've always been, and they will always be that way, right? We have neighborhoods that have central business districts, which is a good thing, but it kind of seems like they're just going to be there for always. And so we have to be a little bit more creative how we can use our existing land, our existing neighborhoods, which, by the way, are geographically and strategically very important to the city. So it's really important that we do look at the development of our neighborhoods in this way, not in terms of, poor and rich, or, a black or white neighborhood, or this or that, but, how can we be, as an integrated city, how can we build up all neighborhoods? So you have to forgive me, I'm actually using two different slides here. But in any case, so what we're trying to do at the Changing Ground Project is we are introducing a new method of development. And what we are doing is we would like to bring to the table a new land management tool by the name of land readjustment. So land readjustment is actually a common tool that's used all around the world outside of the United States, mostly in places like Europe and Asia. And it's a way of developing a piece of land in such a way so that the original owners actually take part in the ownership of the new development. So it's a way of including the existing owners in the development. This is a very successful tool. It's been used for probably 200 years. In some places it's the law. In some places, in Germany, for example, you must develop in this certain kind of way. In other places, it's just really great practice. So if you look at Hong Kong and how Hong Kong was able to flourish as a huge metropolitan area, they basically built up their downtown Hong Kong using land readjustment. So I'm going to just take a look at one little example of what that would look like. So this is a typical example of land readjustment. A typical land readjustment model would involve a developer building on existing land. So here we have 4 single-family homes, for example, on the left-hand side. And what would happen here is the developer would come to these 4 households and make an agreement with them. The developer would say, we want to build a multifamily on your piece of property. And instead of buying your house, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a brand new condo in this new multifamily home, no strings attached. This is your ownership, and it will be, I don't know, 1.5 times the value of your existing home. And so this is a very typical example that happens all around the world, actually. And maybe you guys have even seen examples of this, but this is land readjustment at its most basic, typical level. So what we are trying to do in the Changing Ground Project is we're trying to see how that model can work in our suburban neighborhood. So we think that what we saw in the last slide would work great here. I think there are a lot of areas where we could make that agreement with people who live in single-family homes and be able to produce more multifamily homes. But what we're also doing is we're exploring more models, and in particular, we're looking at a model where a single-family homeowner would not only get a condo unit, but they would also get, so not only do they get a new condo unit, but they would also get to keep their land through a ground lease. So that is one thing we are experimenting with, and we have been lucky to be able to work with the Village of Silverton over the past few years, where we have introduced that model. So here we have one of our town meetings, which was this particular one was at High Grain Brewery. We met with the homeowners very frequently in different settings, and many times even had just many interviews with them. And this is basically the properties that were theirs. So these were the properties that we were working with, and here you see a mix of commercial, single-family homes, apartments. There were a lot of really aging homes, some as far back as the 1900s. They had leaky basements and roofs. Some of the owners were stuck because they didn't feel that they could cover the expenses of the repairs and get the expenses back, in reselling. So they were really interested in rebuilding. So this idea really sounded very good to them. This is our plot of land that we were dealing with. It was a 6-acre site at the heart of Silverton, at the corner of Plainfield and Montgomery Road. This particular site is very important to Silverton. It is their central business district. It's something that you really, when you develop it, you really want to get right. You don't want to just create an automobile-oriented retail space. You just really want to create more of a destination space. At least that is what our goal was for Silverton. So here is a 3D before image of the neighborhood. The orange buildings that you see are the commercial buildings, while the pink buildings are the owner-occupied single-family homes. This was an after view. showing a mixed development of about 80 apartment units, rentals, with ground floor retail space and townhome units. So this was the vision of the neighborhood that we came up with. And this is just a 2D view of the model. So you might just notice how parking is hidden away from view in this courtyard to maintain a more walkable feel for the community. And here we have more the ownership structure of the development. So in Silverton, the plan was to consolidate all the properties into one big land entity that the original property owners would own. So for example, this entire area that you see in the dotted line would be consolidated by all 19 property owners, and it would be a kind of like a co-op. It could be a co-op, or it could also be formed as a private company. But in any case, it would be a shared ownership amongst all the property owners. And so once you have a larger piece of land, then you're able to do much more with it. So the idea was that the owners would tap a developer to build a condominium unit for them for free, no strings attached, which you'll see here in building 1. This was the condominium unit, in exchange for a no-fee ground lease on the remaining land for a period of 30 years. So what you see here, like the dirt that you see here, it still would remain under the ownership of the original property owners, but the owners would ground lease it to a developer that a developer would develop. So the homeowners would get a free condominium unit, and the developer gets this portion of the land on a ground lease for free for 30 years in exchange for building this condominium unit for the original property owners. Now, when the developer builds this portfolio on the land, these buildings belong to the developer, independent of the land. So the developer can sell this. They don't need to hold on to it. They don't need to consult the owners, for day-to-day business operations and things like that. So it was the separation of ownership really works well here. And what would happen after the 30-year period, once this no-fee ground lease ends, the developer would then start to pay a ground lease back to the original owners, usually like 4% of the annual profits of the developer. And what was also in the agreement, and this is very typical for all ground lease agreements, when the ground lease expires, usually in 99 years, all the improvements made on the land, including all of these buildings, belong back to the descendants of the original owners. So here we're talking about there are a couple really big steps, like milestone steps, where you have these opportunities for creating generational wealth. The first one is really getting the condominium unit for free. And the second one is getting a ground lease from the developer after the no-fee ground lease ends at 30 years. So that's another step. And then the third one is when the descendants of the original property owners actually then own all the development that the developer made. So, and usually at the 99-year mark, what happens is the owners can either renegotiate and the developer can continue to lease out their space, or many times the developer then becomes a property manager and still retains some kind of income from the development. So that was the idea behind Silverton. So a little different, some people thought this is weird, really strange, odd. I don't know how the community is going to react to this. But again, as I said, we did many town halls with them. We did many interviews with them, and after probably like 2 sessions, we got nearly an 80% likely or very likely to participate reaction from the property owners. So the property owner sentiment was actually very high. We asked them on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being very likely to participate. So that's why you see all these 5s on the parcels. So this was a surprise to many people. Many people asked, well, will the owners even understand this? A lot of them were elderly, but the overwhelming reaction was, yes, we definitely want to participate. They were very excited about it. Unfortunately, our developer was not able to fulfill some obligations, so we are now seeking another partner who can continue on this work. But these are some renderings of the site. The idea was to create a destination neighborhood in Silverton, not a pass-through neighborhood as it seems now. What I like about this development is its walkability and the kind of the character and the soul. It's not like a big multi-family building floating in the middle of a parking lot that you see many times when we talk about multi-family development these days, because we simply lack the land, and the only land seems to be like in an abandoned shopping mall or something like that. So these are just the renderings. This is looking down Montgomery Road, corner of Montgomery and Plainfield. These were actually even modest developments. So what you see here are walk-up buildings. They don't even have elevators, but they're just simple walk-ups. There were 80 apartment units planned for this. And then finally, just to recap some of this, the summary of benefits. So land readjustment is super beneficial to the property owners, as it can provide new, more valuable, updated housing in a better neighborhood. Most of all, it enables really everyday people to become institutional investors, in a sense, along with their neighbors, creating generational wealth. For the development partner, it's helpful because it helps developers to assemble land in a more cohesive way. They have full control over the buildings. They can sell it. They can be totally independent. So that's also a very good aspect to the whole arrangement. And finally, probably most powerful is even to the municipalities, because it is a way to increase the tax base. We know a lot of municipalities now are fixed in their boundaries. They can't grow anymore. It's not like they can, it's not like we have a lot of greenfield space in many of our municipalities. So we do need to think about now growth in a vertical sense. How can we grow, by increasing more density and things like that? It definitely attracts more economic development once you get momentum going like this. Great way to address things like blight removal, blight patches, and it's just a more efficient use of providing services in the community. So that is land readjustment as we're trying to talk about it right now. And what we are doing is we are planning to launch a land readjustment initiative in the greater Cincinnati area. It will probably be only a couple communities in the first cohort. We're definitely working along with our partners to create and craft a way of doing it that is just right for Cincinnati, and just right for the growth of Cincinnati, and right for the neighborhood of Cincinnati. Every community is unique. So I will actually hand it off now to my partner, Ed Mathis, who is Vice President of Republic Commercial Real Estate, just to comment on it, and to just comment on it from his perspective and some things that he sees in the model that are beneficial.
Yeah, thank you. So when this was brought up to me, what intrigued me about it was, first I thought, oh, this is just kind of like a condo development. People do those all the time. And I didn't think much about the model, like how would it work other than that. But once I got a chance to sit down with her and she explained it to me, I said, oh, this is an opportunity beyond real estate. It's opportunity for people to get into more of a investor class, more of a generational wealth path. No matter what demographic you're in, we all pretty much deal with the same things, whether, if you don't have the money, you're not able to play in real estate at a meaningful level. And as I see this and as I look at it more, and as I go over the models more, you see that this is an opportunity to, one, it's kind of a third path right now. So you got stagnation, which we have pretty much in almost all the neighborhoods. We have stagnation where they just kind of seem like they're just frozen in time. In 1965, they built this neighborhood, they put in the shopping center, and in 2026, that shopping center still looks the same, but people are just leasing it to new people and they just put new paint on it, but it's the same as that building. It never evolves. Or you have on the other end where you have bigger developers coming in and they're just wiping out everything and not really caring about what the community wants with it. They're just like, hey, whatever it is to bring the max amount of dollars back. If you can afford it, you can live here. If you can't afford it, then find another place to live. And then that forces you to go to another place that's frozen in time, and you never really get to partake in the newer stuff. So I see this as an opportunity for that. If the model works right and you're able to get what happened at Silverton to happen in other neighborhoods, I see it as a place where I live in if I live in Forest Park and we live in a portion of Forest Park that hasn't been that's hard to get developers to come to that area, this might be an enticing way to get them to come. But also, as a resident, I'm able to have say so on what goes there because of this model. And the 99 years, I don't know how many of us are going to be around 99 years from now, but in that, it's good because we're able to pass down that generational wealth to the next group, the next generation. And that's what it's all about. And that's the reason why, we all, not everybody, but majority of people want to get into some kind of investment or real estate or something, because they're able to use that and pass that down to the next one and let them have a bit of a step up from where we are now. So I really believe that this model is really good. I think it'll work in places, let's just say in Bond Hill, where they have the old Swift Commerce. That thing has been stuck in that particular way. I mean, they demoed it, but that'll be a place where it's 27 acres. You can be able to put something like that there. Let's just say if it was several homes on that and you took down those homes when they cleared it, those owners will be able to partake in that development that happens there, and they'll be able to make money there. The developers may be able to make money there. The tax base is there for the city. And as we're talking to, I go down and I'm at City Hall, or I'm at the county, or I'm talking to different public figures, the buzzword is always, we need more housing units. We need more this. We need more that. This is an opportunity to do that. It's not going to be the one thing that fixes everything, but it's a tool that can help us get there a little bit closer. Mixed with the old ways of developers, mixed with something that we haven't heard of yet. All of these different models put together helps us get there, because we don't have a demand problem. If I put up an apartment building today, the apartment building will be filled up by next week. We don't have a demand problem. We have a neighborhoods frozen in time problem. And then when the product gets built, the product is too expensive. So it's like, how can I find a middle ground that works? So I really think this model is awesome. I think that when she brought it to me and it's like, what do you think about this? As I got to digging into it, I'm like, this is really a good pathway. We as residents of this region have to see how it works for us and make sure that we're able to get the most out of it. But this is an opportunity for us to be able to attack that problem of lack of inventory, because 16 years in a row, we've had record numbers. If the thing hits the market, we're able to, it's getting sold or it's getting leased. People want the housing. It's just that it has to be the right housing for what you want. So I think this is a great opportunity for that. So I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll just open it up for questions or comments if anyone has any. Yes.
Yeah, when this was first introduced, and I said, well, I want to go and see this. This is just another refurbished, restated developer land grab. This might actually work. This has got some backbone to it. Yeah. Especially for owners that are aging out like me.
I'm glad you brought that up. When we were going through the interviews in Silverton, what was really kind of neat was that there was like a switch in people's mind. Usually if a developer calls and says, would you like to sell your house, for development, everyone's like, no, don't call me anymore. But there was a complete switch in people's minds when they knew that they were going to be the owners. And what you also saw was self-governance starting to form. People saying, hey, I'll go and talk to my neighbor over here. He's not quite getting everything. Or you can come over and use my living room and we can meet here. So it was a real kind of on the ground self-governance starting to form amongst the people there, which was really a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah, it's a refreshing take on it, because it's like, when you're dealing with developers now, I get a bad taste in your mouth because they tend to do things to the community, not with the community. And it's not every developer. I mean, and some of them try, and then they meet resistance, and then they have time clocks on the money that they borrowed, so they have to bulldoze through and to make it happen, or they lose on their end. But I think that this model, it shows that you can, I wrote something down that, growth should happen with the people, not around the people. So I think that this is an opportunity for that to happen. And I think people will enjoy the ownership side of it if they can be able to see, like, oh, if I sell my house into this partnership, I'm able to, if I sell my house into this partnership and we structure it in a certain way, we're able to partake in those winnings. And that's what it's all about. It's not just about come along, sell my house, and then I got to find somewhere else to move, and I got to check, and I'm able to go. But if I'm able to partake in this for the next 30 to 40 years, and then my grandkids or my children, that's a plus, and that's what we want. That's what we should all want.
Win-win.
Yeah.
All right, next question.
His hand up was first, I think.
Go for it. Oh,
Yeah.
right there.
Two quicker questions, but one, it looked like there was like one person who maybe was a 3 versus a 5. And I wanted to see what happens if just like 50 people and one person is kind of holding out.
Oh, like a holdout.
Yeah, and the other question is, it seems like a great model. What I wonder is, at year 90 in the model, I know that's far down.
Yep.
Do they stop reinvesting in their property and let it kind of dwindle down because they're not going to be the owner? And how would you keep that
From occurring, right.
Yeah.
So the developer who comes in at year 90, because this can be sold and resold, as many times as you want, they know what they're getting into, but it's probably something like, kind of like a pension fund type of developer who's not looking for, the, 14% ROI, but like they're happy with the 7% ROI. So it's for a smaller market investor ROI. So there is a market for that. There is perfectly, people who will be responsible landowners and who can take on, that role. In terms of the holdout, so that was a topic of big discussion. In this particular case, the holdout really would not have affected the development. So we would have just built around the holdout. So this is a voluntary process. We did not want to use eminent domain in it. There are moments where you can use eminent domain. For example, if your property goes through a road, things like that. But in this case, we wanted to make it purely a volunteer process. So in this case, we would just have, built around those holdouts. Yep.
I think she won one over there, or him behind you, one of them. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm just curious if you've had any conversations with local developers, if that ground lease is scary, if they want full site control, what kind of local feedback you've gotten on the structure?
So that's a great question. When I kind of started this work, I sort of thought that developers were thinking like me as like a homeowner or as an owner of a property, I would want to own my land. A developer is pretty much just looking at the ROI. If you can have multifamily there that's creating great returns, they are happy with that. I think it's a newer model here in Cincinnati. If you go to the East Coast, for example, like in New York, I remember walking down the street and a friend of mine saying, oh yeah, this skyscraper, the lease is up, and their 99-year lease is up in a year. I couldn't believe like a skyscraper's on a ground lease, So many of like the CVS's, the Targets that we see even here are on ground leases. The corporate owner, Target, does not want to own land. They just want to own, that shell. So actually, I think developers, there's a whole, community of them that are comfortable with the ground lease situation. Probably less so here. I think that it will be a learning curve. But it's been done, and it's, in the densely populated areas, I think it's more common even to see things like that. Yes.
So you were able to convince 19 homeowners to give up their home and move into a condo. What arguments were convincing to them? Because, and can you show the rendering again?
Sure.
Because in my experience,
Is this one?
no,
Or
the digital model. No, yeah, there you go. In my experience, this is exactly what a lot of homeowners would hate to see show up in their neighborhood. So what arguments were you able to make to convince them to move out of their single-family home into a condo, give up having a backyard, give up having, you know, some of the perks that come with being a homeowner?
Sure.
I'm amazed that I was very doubtful that you actually got people to agree to that, but then you showed the graph that it was a plurality of people who would do that. So I'm interested in what arguments were convincing to people.
So just so you know, there were 6 owner-occupied homes,
Okay.
and the rest of the owners were what we would say were commercial owners. Even if it was a single-family home, it was someone who was renting it out, so we consider that a commercial owner. So there was really 6 key households